What's up, everybody? Corey used Bloody History. So, we're going to continue on with these Jack Ruby files. You know why? Because they're pretty interesting to me. They're intriguing. They're little tidbits. They're sprinkles. There's no cohesive storylines going on here with the exception of the suspicion of them being communists, right? But I highly doubt that this was Jack Ruby and Earl Ruby and his sister that we all know in New Haven. I have no evidence of them being in New Haven. So, let us continue on. 11/25/63. Re San Diego teletype to director and director teletype to San Diego instant. At 9:30 p.m. November 24 last, Hal M. Collins telephonically contacted San Diego police officer Bill Lutz and advised that he desired to make a statement concerning Jack Ruby. SDPD relayed information this office, and Collins was telephonically contacted at the home of his sister-in-law, La Jolla, California. La Jolla, here we go with La Jolla again. Who else spent time in La Jolla? Lauren Hall. Collins identified himself as being the brother of Mrs. Robert Clark, sister-in-law of Justice Tom Clark. Robert Clark is deceased. Collins had indicated to SDPD he was from Dallas, Texas, mentioned name of his good friend John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson. Collins advised S.A. William S. Fields telephonically he desired to make a statement the night of November 24 last concerning Jack Ruby. Stated he'd been a close personal friend of Ruby for many years, described him as a hero worshiper in love with John Kennedy. Always a gentleman, sincere, intellectual, and the shooting was his own idea. Collins stated in his opinion Ruby shot Oswald on impulse because of his personal animosity over the assassination of President Kennedy. Stated it was obvious Ruby waited until all evidence against Oswald was in before making his move. At the beginning of the interview, Collins on November 24 last said he wanted to make a public statement immediately concerning the shooting of Oswald. He was advised any statement he made to the Bureau was not a public statement. He said he considered the above information to be pertinent, and he wanted it known that he made such a statement concerning Ruby. All right, so 11/25/63 to director in SACS Dallas, Memphis, Salt Lake City from SAC Phoenix. Re Salt Lake City Tel to director. Lee Beasley, as per Retel, apparently identical with Lee Russell Beasley, white male, born October 4, 1919, who, as of August 1951, was considered suspect Memphis case. Entitled Unsub Merchants and Farmers Bank, August 2051 burglary. Investigation conducted by Phoenix, re-above case revealed that Beasley from 1948 to 1950 operated the Hotel Beasley in Phoenix and was reported to have previously operated the Elgin Hotel. PXPD and MCSO have no information identifiable with Beasley. Check of current directories is negative. For the information of Memphis, Salt Lake City, Retail furnished info that one Lee Beasley, who about 10 or 11 years ago operated the Elgin Hotel and Mays Hotel in Phoenix, was possibly identical with subject Ruby. Information available to Phoenix would indicate that Beasley is not identical with Ruby. However, Memphis is requested to verify same, noting that Beasley was residing in Memphis about August of 51, and he was considered suspect concerning above captioned bank burglary. For the info of Bureau Dallas Salt Lake, redacted, who in early 1950 did furnish some information of a security nature to this office, but was never a confidential informant. 11/25/63, Rebutel, November 25 last. Redacted, frequented Clover Bar next door, Sherman Hotel, Chicago, Illinois, 1946 to 1949. He described this bar as a hangout bar for a hoodlum element. At the time, it was operated by Ira Kolitz, Colitz, who was described as a personal friend of Colonel Jacob Arvey, Arvey. Well-known Chicago political figure. Kolitz possibly was recently candidate for alderman in Chicago and resides in a penthouse apartment on Michigan Boulevard. Informant related Jack Ruby, whom he identified from newspaper photographs, frequented Clover Bar in about 1946 or 47, was an acquaintance of Ira Kolitz and possibly a former schoolmate of Kolitz on the west side of Chicago. Does not know the nature of Ruby's activities in Chicago. Informant stated that in about December 1, 1949, he was in Dallas, Texas, at which time Ruby was operating a nightclub, name unknown, with Western Band and Western Motif. Informant visited this club and chatted briefly with Ruby, who requested that he convey Ruby's regards to Kolitz when informant returned to Chicago. Informant has not seen or heard from Ruby since 1949 and has never had any specific information concerning Ruby's background or activities, but has never had any reason to suspect him of being involved in subversive activities. November 25th, 63. Rebutel teletype. Joseph P. Rossi, R-O-S-S-I. Real estate, 231 Mercantile Continental Building, Dallas. November 25, instant advised essays Thomas Crawford and Clay Zachary Jr. as follows. It said that he and Jack Ruby, whose real name is Rubenstein, were both born and reared in the 24th Ward in Chicago. However, did not know each other until about 11 years ago when they met in Dallas. Ruby had the Silver Spur Club and later the Vegas Club. Rossi does not know of any Ruby's family, but said they're Jews, and that Jack Ruby observes Jewish religious customs. Rossi knows of no connection between Oswald and Ruby. States that Ruby is highly emotional and has a high temper. He heard Ruby cried when President Roosevelt died. We're talking about, that's in the 40s or 50s, right? Rossi described Ruby as being very anti-communist, but not a member of any hate group. He describes Ruby as a 24th Ward Chicago Jake Arvey Democrat. Rossi knows of no connection Ruby has with gamblers or organized crime. However, stated Ruby knows some of these people personally. Rossi knows of no close relations Ruby had with any police in Dallas. Rossi last saw Ruby in Dallas November 20 last, at which time Ruby discussed opening a new club and wanted Rossi to invest money in the club, perhaps help manage it. Ruby talked of a future plan and a manager leading Rossi to believe that Ruby had not thought about getting into trouble. Rossi stated that when Ruby was identified over television as killer of Oswald, his first thought was that Ruby was typed to be emotional enough to do that sort of thing. Rossi believes that Ruby's motive in killing Oswald was oversimplified solution of a simple and emotional man obtaining justice in this case. FD302 follows on above. Sources at San Antonio, Austin, Waco, Temple, and Farr had no pertinent information. Sources contacted negatively November 25 instant. All right. A bunch of redactions here, so I'm trying to see what's relevant. Following contacted by S.A. Morton P. Childs Jr., Captain Robert Allen, Vice Squad, San Antonio PD, and check of Vice. Contacted negatively at Austin, Texas. There's too much redactions here for me to understand what's going on. Here's a good example. Contacted at Waco, Texas by S.A. T.G. McWilliams Jr., and then you have 3 lines of redactions. Same thing on page 4, same thing on page 5. All right. So it seems like there's some interesting stuff there, but they all redacted it. November 25th, 63. Chicago teletype to the Bureau in Dallas, November 24 last. November 25, 1963. J. Bischoff, B-I-S-H-O-V, attorney, 6060 Northridge, business address 5152 North Clark, Chicago, Illinois. Advised S.A. Daniel Blake he visited Havana, Cuba for 3 or 4 days about the 1st of September, and it was Labor Day weekend in 1959. Bischoff stated he was with 2 other companions, Jack Marcus and Sherwin Braun, both of Chicago, Illinois. Bischoff stated the 2nd or 3rd night in Havana, Cuba, he and Braun and Marcus were standing near a crap table or roulette wheel at the Tropicana nightclub when a man approached and introduced himself by the name which Bischoff believed was Jack Ruby. Ruby asked where the 3 men were from, and when Bischoff stated the west side of Chicago, Ruby stated that he was also from that section of Chicago, but had moved to Dallas, Texas some years before. Bischoff stated Ruby did not specify any particular street names or individuals with whom he'd been acquainted in Chicago. Bischoff stated Jack Ruby extended an invitation to the 3 men to visit him at one of his nightclubs in Dallas. Bischoff stated he was under the impression Ruby owned more than one nightclub in Dallas and indicated that these clubs were somewhat plush. Bischoff stated Ruby appeared to know his way around the Tropicana nightclub and may have been familiar with some of the employees. Bischoff stated the conversation lasted only about 10 minutes and nothing other than above casual comments were made. Bischoff stated no radical political type statements were made, nor was there any indication by Ruby he belonged to any particular organizations. Bischoff stated he did not know how long Ruby had been in Havana, where he was staying, nor when he was supposed to return to the U.S. Bischoff stated he was not sure the name nor of the picture appearing in the daily newspaper that it was identical to the Jack Ruby he met in Cuba, but described this individual as a white male American of average build, 5'7" to 6 foot tall, 165 to 200 pounds, dark hair with a Jewish appearance, and was in his mid or late 40s. Bischoff stated Ruby was an extrovert and a loud talker, but appeared to be friendly. Sherwin Jack Braun, architect, 6238 North Hoyne, business address, 140 East Ontario, Chicago. Advised on the Labor Day weekend of 1959, he, Marcus, and Jay Bischoff visited Havana, Cuba for 3 or 4 days while on a Florida vacation prior to returning to school in Chicago. On the first or second night in Havana, the three men had visited the Tropicana in Havana and were standing by the roulette wheel or crap table when a man walked up and introduced himself. Braun advised he thought the man gave his name as Jack Ruby, but was not sure. Braun stated he did not know the man, stated he'd originally been from Chicago, but owned some sort of nightclub or establishment in Texas, possibly in Dallas. The man invited the three men to go to visit him whenever they got to Texas. Braun stated he believed Ruby was alone, but appeared to know his way around and was familiar with employees of the Tropicana. Braun stated Ruby didn't give him a business card, nor did he know how long Ruby stayed there. Braun described the man known as Jack Ruby as a white male, large or heavy build, round or oval face. The round or oval face. I'm sorry, but that catches me off guard because I've got some other references to our friend with a round face in Dealey Plaza, possibly Jack Ruby, but we'll talk about that some other time. Braun stated no radical or political type statements were made, nor were any comments made other than casual remarks by Ruby. Interesting. So obviously people who don't think that Jack Ruby was part of the mob, of course he was, right? So he was associating with Ralph Paul, another Jew, but that guy was from Chicago. He grew up with Yaris and Patrick, right? He knew Frank the Irishman Sheeran. He knew Red Dorfman. He knew Giancana. He knew Traficante. And then he's down there in 59 at the casinos in Cuba. Give me a fucking break. He was balls deep with these hoodlums, as the FBI would put it. 11/26/63. Henry Wade, District Attorney, Dallas County, today advised Dallas County Grand Jury had returned indictment against Jack Rubenstein, alias Jack Ruby, charging murder with malice in the death of Lee Harvey Oswald. Indictment brought under Article 1256, Vernon's Texas Penal Code. Wade advised Ruby was being held without bail, and trial under indictment was tentatively scheduled for December 9 next, although anticipated trial would actually begin in early January 64. November 26th, 63, re-Jacksonville teletype, 11:25. Re-background Jack Leon Ruby. On 11/26/63, Matthew Tracy, Palm Beach Athletic Club. Advised he was in Daytona Beach in the late 1940s. He left there about 1950, knew no one by the name of Ruben who operated in the Daytona area. November 26/63, Rebutel. November 25 last, to all SACs and Los Angeles Tel to Bureau. Dallas and Chicago, November 26 incident. Gambling informants, Los Angeles. Division, PCI redacted, personally negative on Ruby. Provided name of Morris Block, one-time Chicago bar operator. And Bookie, who furnished info forwarded in FD 302 and teletype lead for Chicago. Others contacted with negative results are, and then there's 4 lines of redactions. November 26th, re-background Maury and Joe Kellerman. Joe Kellerman, former neighborhood friend of Rubenstein. As Charlotte is aware, subject Rubenstein shot and killed Lee Oswald in Dallas, Texas, November 24, 1963. Maury Kellerman, owner, Globe Glass Manufacturing Company, Chicago, interviewed November 25, 1963. Advised he grew up with Rubenstein in the near southwest side of Chicago, furnished additional information concerning his association with Rubenstein, and further advised that his brother, Joe Kellerman, owner of Globe Glass and Trim Company, Chicago, also knew Rubenstein in Chicago, but probably not to the degree that he knew Rubenstein due to differences in ages. Said Joe Kellerman, presently undergoing rice tests. Don't know what that is. At the medical school. Tests for medical school, Duke University. Said Kellerman staying at Jack Tar Hotel, room 1101, Durham. Charlotte is requested to immediately interview Kellerman and determine what he knows about Rubenstein and determine if he knows any connection between Rubenstein, his sister Eva Grant, and the old Capone gang in Chicago. That's interesting. Also, inquire if he knows any information to the effect that Rubenstein was forced out of Chicago in the late 40s by the Chicago hoodlum element. The above lead should be handled immediately. I wonder why they're looking into that. Connection between Jack Ruby and the Capone organization. November 26, 63. Abe Cohen, COHN, President, Sangamon Paper Grading Company, 1613 West 15th Street. Resides at 730 1 Sheridan Road. Phone Sheldrake 3-2-539. Interviewed by S.A.'s Clement J. Hood and Roger J. Grattan. November 26, 63. Advised as follows. While all were approximately 10 to 12 years of age, Cohn resided at 1132 Sacramento Boulevard. Rubenstein at 1127 Sacramento Boulevard, and Leon Cook at 1132 Sacramento. Rubenstein came from a large fatherless family, was always hustling work. He wasn't from a fatherless family. Wonder why he would say that. Interesting. Cohn and Cook had fathers who always made it possible for them to receive additional education, while Rubenstein was always working to support his mother. Maybe he just was living with his mother at the time because they were separated. After Cook received his law degree, he organized the Waste Material Handlers Union. Cohn advised Rubenstein was an organizer for Cook and the only other employee of the union known to Cohn. Cohn could not recall exact dates, but remembered the union was organized during the mid-30s after the NRA was declared unconstitutional. Cohn had lost track of Rubenstein after the Cohn family had moved from the area while they were still in school. Cohn took over his father's business and was running an open shop. Rubenstein, without Cohn's knowledge, started organizing Cohn's employees into the union. Cohn discovered Rubenstein talking to his employees in front of their place of business, and it was then he became aware that Rubenstein was acting as an organizer for Cook. Cohn's business was organized as a union shop, and thereafter Rubenstein was in regular contact with Cohn while acting as the union representative. This continued for a couple of years until Cook was killed, probably during the late 1930s. After Cook's death, the union movement and the plant became disorganized, but some months later, Rubenstein appeared at the plant and advised Cohn he was reorganizing the employees, presumably in the same union. Rubenstein was at the plant regularly for a few weeks, but complained to Cohn that his heart was not in it. Speaking of the new union, he told Cohn he was going to quit the union. Cohn didn't know of anyone besides Rubenstein connected with the reorganization of the union. Cohn claimed only hearsay knowledge of Rubenstein thereafter. He said that he had not seen or talked with Rubenstein since long before World War II. He had heard from an unrecalled source that after Rubenstein got out of the service, he settled in Dallas. He seemed to recall that Rubenstein had been in Texas while in the service and decided to settle there. Cohn said to his knowledge Rubenstein was not involved in organized crime or the rackets, and pointed out that Rubenstein was always a poor man and never lived expensively or wore good clothing or drove an automobile. That's interesting. Cohn said the only thing he knew Rubenstein to do in addition to union organizing was to sell gadget and premium type objects. Cohn observed that Rubenstein had always been emotional and was soft-hearted, but never indicated he could be vicious. Cohn considered Rubenstein a true loyal American who had never had anything to do with movements such as communism. So here we go again with a contradicting description. Cohn observed that Rubenstein always had been emotional and was soft-hearted, but never indicated he would be vicious. See, that's not how we get other descriptions of Jack Ruby, is it? Cohn commented that Rubenstein had been fatherless, and the shock of the assassination and knowledge that the Kennedy children would also be without a father could have motivated the murder of Oswald. Sounds like bullshit. November 26th. November 26th instant, Chief of Police Horace Grayson, National Academy, advised that an associate of his had told him that a man by the name of Grimes, an employee of Wayne Reeder, Reeder, a Bakersfield realtor, previously knew Jack Ruby. On November 26th instant, Mr. Jack Kelly Grimes, salesman, Wayne Reeder Realty, 220 South Chester Avenue, telephone 831-4242, advised he resides at 2610 19th Street, Bakersfield. Grimes related that he knew Jack Ruby for a period of 3 months during the summer of 1959. Grimes reported that during this period, he was vice president of the International Life Insurance Company, Austin, Texas. He said James E. Dunn II was the then president of this company. Grimes said that Jack Grimes, James E. Dunn, and Joe Slayton were during the summer of 1959 in partnership in the Sovereign Room, a club in an upstairs location on Commerce Street, across the street from the Adolphus Hotel in Dallas. Grimes said during the summer of 1959, he'd been in Dallas for the purpose of soliciting members for the Sovereign Room by contacting persons who were known to him because of having previously been contacted as life insurance clients. Grimes said during the 3-month period, he had daily contact with Ruby. He said these contacts were exclusively at the Sovereign Room and that he could not recall ever having seen Ruby outside of this location. Grimes said he had no contact whatsoever with Ruby since the summer of 1959 and therefore would have no knowledge of his present activities, contacts, associates, or his current attitude. With reference to his activities before 1959, Grimes said Ruby told him he previously resided in Chicago, Illinois. Grimes said he knew nothing else concerning Ruby's activities before 1959. Grimes said he had never discussed national or international politics with Ruby and therefore had no idea as to his political thinking. He said he knows of no connection that Ruby may have had with the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, any possible acquaintanceship he may have had with Lee Harvey Oswald, or any radical or extremist views or activities Ruby may have had. Grimes said he knows of no relative of Ruby, with the exception of a sister whose name he never knew, who Ruby had mentioned. Grimes said during his association with Ruby, he had observed many uniformed officers and persons in plain clothes who had been identified to him as being Dallas detectives come into the Sovereign Room, where they were cordially greeted by Ruby, who seemed to be well acquainted with them. He said he could not identify any of these officers by name. He said he assumed these officials came to the Sovereign Room in line with their official duties as police officers. Mr. Grimes said that during the period he knew Ruby, he found him to be a perfect gentleman at all times. He said he did not smoke, drink, or use foul language. He said Ruby had shown him a revolver, which he said he thought was a Colt Cobra, and that Ruby had told him he carried the gun as a regular habit inasmuch as he made enemies over the years because of the business he was in. Mr. Grimes said Joe Slayton and James E. Dunn had withdrawn their interest in the Sovereign Room, and that it was his understanding an elderly man by the name of Ralph from Fort Worth, Texas, and Ruby had operated the Sovereign Room. I'm talking about Ralph Paul. After Dunn and Slayton withdrew their interests, Grimes said that Ralph's complete identity would be known to Joe Slayton. Grimes said James E. Dunn and Joe Slayton knew Ruby far better than he, and said he felt quite certain that he would be able to furnish considerable background information concerning Ruby. Grimes said that James Dunn presently operates the Dunn Press at Louisville, Kentucky, where he said Dunn publicizes an insurance reporting service. Grimes said Joe Slayton resides in Dallas, Texas, where he understands he now operates a drugstore. Grimes said Slayton would be well known to practically all the business establishments on Commerce Street in Dallas. If not already done, Louisville will interview James E. Dunn. Dallas will interview Joe Slayton through him ascertain the identity of Ralph in order that Ralph may be contacted. All right, November 26, 63. Reference Raymond Lewis. Raymond Lewis, furrier, 190 North State Street, Chicago, advised SA's Benjamin Helsel Jr. and James H. Thompson on November 26 instant that Jack Ruby is unknown to him by name or photographic resemblance. Lewis denied ever seeing him, knowing him, employing him, or being associated with him. Ed Mathens, Barber, Clark, and Lake Streets, Chicago, advised SA's Helsel and Thompson on November 26 instant. He was been a barber at this location for 27 years. He denied knowing or ever hearing of a barber named Al Indies. Joe Indies, Furrier, 190 North State, Chicago, advised SA's Helsel and Thompson on November 26 instant. His is the only family in Chicago area with the surname of Indes, I-N-D-E-S. No one in his family has ever been to a barber, or has ever been a barber. Chester Wisnicki, Illinois Department of Education and Licensing, 160 North State Street, Chicago, advised S.A. Helsel on November 26 instant. A review of their records at Chicago and Springfield, Illinois, failed to reflect the issuance of a barber's license for an Al Indies in any city in Illinois in the past 20 years. Marie Williams, Clerk, Master Barbers Association, 188 West Randolph Street, Chicago, advised S.A. Helsel on November 26 instant. Their files failed to reflect the presence of Al Indies as a licensed barber in Chicago, Illinois. All right, November 27th, to Director FBI. Reference Chicago teletype to the Director, 1126. Reference the background of Joe Kellerman. Enclosed for Dallas, 35 copies, FD 302, reflecting interview, Joe Kellerman, Chicago, Illinois. Doesn't seem to go to that, though. Seems to jump to something else, unless I'm reading this wrong. This one's dated November 27th also, to Director FBI from San Francisco. Concerning possible travel of Ruby. Polygraph examination report. Aubrey D. Peloton was given a polygraph examination at San Francisco, California, November 26, 63, by S.A. David Todd. During the pretest interview, De Peloton advised polygraph examination report. Aubrey De Peloton was given a polygraph examination at San Francisco, California, November 26, 1963, by S.A. David Todd. S.A. Willard E. Baseman was present at the examination. During the pretest interview, De Peloton advised that his general health is good, that he had no history of heart trouble, tuberculosis, or other respiratory illness, had no history of mental illness. He did state that in 1951 he suffered a severe head injury in an automobile accident resulting in temporary loss of memory, and that he was given electroencephalogram tests in connection with his hospitalization. He claims he has no current memory defect and that he fully recovered. During the polygraph examination, he was questioned in regard to the story he furnished previously to the effect that on Wednesday evening, November 20th, 1963, at approximately 11:30 p.m., he, as a cab driver, picked up a fare near the Greyhound bus terminal in San Francisco, California, and delivered this fare to the general area of Jones and Eddy Street, San Francisco, and that during the ride, this individual told him that his name was Jack Ruby, and that he mentioned that he was going to kill someone. No significant emotional responses were recorded by the polygraph, which would indicate that De Peloton was telling a deliberate falsehood. It is the opinion of the examiner that an incident with some person hiring De Peloton's cab occurred generally as described by him. However, in view of De Peloton's past medical history, the possibility must be considered that he may be confused with respect to the name Jack Ruby. De Peloton stated he could not identify a photograph of Ruby. So one thing about these documents and these reports is that you did get a lot of nut jobs coming out of the woodwork, right? And these were all leads that seemingly were followed up on. We haven't even begun to get to the thousands of pages of letters that were written to the FBI and to the White House and to everybody else that are out there and easy to dig up. Wild stuff. everybody thinks all kinds of stuff. I mean, one guy wrote a letter, remember this one, to the FBI, and he said that he thought that Frank Sinatra's drummer was one of the shooters in Dealey Plaza. It was really funny stuff. But yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. But hey, this is the thing. When you have to go through all these documents to get to those little gems, you know? So just to put that in perspective, we're on page 440 out of 4,700. So we have really, in the past week and a half or so, made it about 10% of the way through these documents. Now, we're not going to go through all the way through at this point in time. We'll do something else probably tomorrow. But let me continue for now. 1127.63. Retail 1123 last to above offices in Newark. Files New York office failed to reflect any information identifiable with Sam Jaffe, mentioned in retail as resident of Muncie, Indiana, and now deceased. Also, Files New York office failed to reflect any information concerning Jack Rubenstein, alleged son-in-law of Sam Jaffe. Files of New York office contain 2 references to, and then holy shit, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 lines of redaction. 15 lines of redaction that we have no idea what it's referring to. Then it goes, Files New York office failed to reflect any information concerning Philip Jasser, Herbert Pizzol, or Morton Stant, Standt, Indianapolis. Furnish any info available concerning Morton Pizzol. Cincinnati. Furnish info, reference Lawson Jeffy. 1127.63 to Director, FBI, from Portland. Forwarded under separate cover to the Bureau is the developed roll of 8mm motion picture film in color, which includes photos of an individual who was possibly Lee Harvey Oswald, as he took part in a street demonstration in New Orleans in August of 1963. The film was provided the night of November 27th, 63 by J. Pat Doyle, D-O-Y-L-E, 1107 Southeast 123rd, Portland, Oregon. Enclosed herewith for Dallas are 9 copies of FD-302s, incorporating information supplied by Mr. and Mrs. Doyle. Mr. Doyle is employed as a power line construction foreman by the Charles T. Parker Construction Company in Portland. In August of 63, he and his wife, Mrs. Charlene Doyle, and their 2 children, Jim, age 14, and Sharon, 11, traveled to New Orleans from Portland on a combination business and vacation trip. They were accompanied by Mr. and Mrs. Matt Wilson and their 2 children, Marcia, age 13, and Donald, 11. Mr. Wilson, also in the construction business, operating his own firm, the Wilson Construction Company, 14714 Northeast Hancock, Portland, where he also resides. He was attending an electrical contractors convention with Doyle in New Orleans. Doyle is president of the National Electrical Contractors in Portland, and Wilson is the governor of the Northwest Line Construction Contractors. At approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Friday, August 9th, 1963, 2 families were walking on Canal Street in New Orleans, where they observed 2 young men who were carrying pro-Cuban signs and distributing leaflets. One carried a placard on a stick, according to young Sharon Doyle. This placard bore the figure of the Statue of Liberty and had such wording as "Cuba in chains and only 90 miles from the U.S." The other man, possibly Oswald, was wearing on his front a yellowish or orange-colored sign which bore the wording "Viva la Fidel," and other wording believed similar to that on the above placard. The Doyle family were agreed on the "Viva is Fidel." The Doyle said that the demonstration was taking place in the approximate middle of the block on Canal Street, some 5 blocks towards the Mississippi River from the Jung Hotel. As the Doyles and Wilsons passed the area, the 2 demonstrators were rushed by 8 Cubans. Mr. Doyle counted them, who argued vigorously with the 2 men, and trouble appeared imminent. Several police officers arrived on the scene immediately, however, both by car and on foot, and after talking to the 2 demonstrators for a time, apparently arrested them and placed them in a patrol car. This, however, was not before the placard on the stick had been smashed and the leaflets scattered on the sidewalk. It was believed by the Doyles that the pieces of the placard were picked up and placed in the police car. Mr. Doyle commented that the policemen were able to arrive on the scene so hurriedly, apparently because they had been keeping an eye on some picketing by Negroes, which was taking place across the street a short distance away. The pictures of the incident in the enclosed roll of film were taken by young Jim Doyle. It will be noted that other vacation pictures appear on the roll, both before and after the New Orleans incident. So there's some photographs out there from Jim Doyle. Wonder if we can find those photographs. It'll be noted that other vacation pictures appear on the roll, both before and after the New Orleans incident. The pertinent portion of the film occurs immediately following scenes showing Sharon Doyle in front of a statue and a brief view of Mrs. Doyle standing alone. It ends with a view of what appears to be a warehouse on the river. At one point, the individual, who is possibly Oswald, can be seen with his back to the camera, talking to an officer. He is motioning with one hand. Mr. Doyle explained that he apparently was indicating that he had a right to walk on the sidewalk. Subsequent scenes show the man through the crowd. At one point, his yellow sign can be seen but not deciphered. His companion never appears. The film is being forwarded in order that the Bureau may make copies of the pertinent scenes. If it so desired, Mr. Doyle stated that the Bureau may use the film for whatever use it may desire and keep it as long as necessary. He asked, however, eventually the film be returned. In view of the circumstances, the presence of the police officers and the apparent arrest of the two demonstrators, complete information concerning the incident may already be in the possession of the Dallas Division. Consequently, any pertinent leads are being left to that office. Information concerning the incident as provided by Mr. and Mrs. Wilson will be provided as soon as they can be interviewed. November 27, 1963, to Director, FBI, Dallas and New Orleans. No-Tel, November 27 instant. Investigation by Washington Field Office disclosed no passport issued to Jack Ruby, a.k.a. Jack Rubenstein. Therefore, UACB, Washington Field Office, will not interview Harold Gibbons at the National Teamsters Union. So, Jack Ruby had no passport. That seems relevant enough to screenshot, doesn't it? Yes, it does. But he had other ways to get down to Cuba, I'm sure. Because he was there in 1959, right? Numerous witnesses put him there. All right, 11/27/63. Phone call from Supervisor Schultz, November 27th. Pistol used on Oswald by Ruby. .38 caliber Colt Cobra, serial number 2744. LW/lightweight/ in possession Dallas Police Department in connection their murder case against Ruby. Lieutenant Carl Day, Dallas Police Department, verified above serial number and advises weapon not yet fired for ballistic tests. Gun is in possession of PD. All right, let me screenshot that because that seems pretty important. So this is addressing the gun that Ruby allegedly used when he shot Oswald, a .38 caliber Colt Cobra, serial number 2744 LW/lightweight. So the serial is just 2744. Yeah, I can see that being a very small, short serial number back then. So as of that date, they have not tested it yet. So wait a minute. As of the 27th, they had not test fired the revolver as of yet. So when was it turned over to the FBI, I wonder? Ruby's purchase of above weapon from Ray's hardware store, Dallas, January 1960, verified by Bureau agents through Mr. Ray Brantley and Mrs. Lillian Brantley, proprietors. Okay, so this, I've read before that gun was actually given to him by Joe Cody. So, Jim, if you can try to pull some information on this gun and see if this gun was actually given to him by Joe Cody, because that is the information that I have read very commonly when reading about this. Also, we know that Ruby was in Houston on the 23rd, right? He went to Houston, and there he was seen buying another gun, buying a handgun there. So there's some obfuscation surrounding the gun that was actually used. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. All right, looks like we're moving on to Section 3. Jack Ruby, 44-24016. Section 3. This might actually be a good place to call it, because we can pick it up. We can go on to something else for a while and then come back to this. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. I appreciate it. And I will be back tomorrow. Thank you.